Jada Miller's heart slammed against her ribs as she stood frozen in the harsh glow of police spotlights. A dozen uniformed officers had their weapons aimed at her, barking orders she barely processed. "Get down on the ground now." Her hands were already raised, her breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. What was happening? She had just left the grocery store, a bag of groceries still clutched in her left hand. It had been an ordinary evening, until now. Two officers rushed forward and yanked her arms behind her back with unnecessary force, slamming her face first onto the asphalt. "You have the right to remain silent, but it won't help you, lady." The officer's words dripped with smugness. Smugness. Like they knew something she didn't. "This is a mistake. I didn't do anything," Jada shouted, her voice muffled against the rough pavement. Another cop knelt beside her, pulling a small baggie from his pocket before shoving it into her jacket pocket. Well, would you look at that? Cocaine." He sneered, shaking his head. Shame. A hard-working citizen caught up in the game. Jada's mind raced. They were planting drugs on her. "That's not mine. You just—" A knee pressed harder into her back, cutting off her breath. Then, one of the officers leaned in close, his breath hot against her ear. "You picked the wrong day to piss off the wrong people, sweetheart." A jolt of something primal surged through her veins. But she didn't react. Not yet. Jada had spent years training her body and mind to be a weapon, years of covert operations, hand-to-hand combat, survival training. She was a high-ranking Navy SEAL, and these corrupt cops had no idea. But she couldn't move. Not yet. Not until she knew exactly who had set her up. As the cuffs snapped around her wrists, she caught the flicker of a smirk between two of the officers. They knew. They wanted this. And now, they had no idea what they just started. Hours later, the cold, sterile air of the precinct holding cell did nothing to calm the storm brewing inside Jada. The faint scent of bleach and sweat clung to the cinderblock walls. The fluorescent lights above buzzed softly, casting a sickly glow over the cell. Jada sat on the metal bench, her fingers lightly flexing against the cuffs still digging into her wrists. Her mind was in overdrive. Who set me up? Why now? She had spent the last 3 years under the radar after her final classified mission. Officially, she was honorably discharged from the Navy SEALs. Unofficially, she still had enemies, powerful ones. Across the room, a young officer sat at his desk, barely paying attention as he scrolled through his phone. She inhaled slowly, studying him. His uniform was crisp, but his posture was lazy, untrained, unaware. Perfect. She had one shot at getting answers. Jada shifted forward, making her body language seem small, non-threatening. The perfect act. "Officer," she said, keeping her voice even. "There's been a mistake. You know that, right?" The officer, barely older than 20, glanced at her, then looked away. "You all say that." Jada exhaled sharply. "I don't have a record. I've never even had a speeding ticket. You think I just decided to start running drugs tonight?" The officer hesitated. His fingers stopped scrolling. Hooked. She pressed on. "Look, I don't know who set me up, but I know dirty cops when I see them. You don't seem like one of them." He sat up straighter, shoulders squaring slightly. "Good. They're framing me," she said, voice low, urgent. "You can check my records. My background." The officer frowned, tapping at his keyboard. Jada's heart pounded as she watched his expression shift from mild curiosity to confusion. "What the?" he muttered, scrolling rapidly. Bingo. Jada knew what he was seeing. A clean record. Government clearance that was way too high for an ordinary citizen. The officer's lips parted slightly, eyes flickering toward her. Who are you?" Before Jada could answer, the heavy metal door of the holding area slammed open. 3 officers strode in. Not just any officers, the same ones who arrested her. "Step away from the prisoner," one of them ordered. The young officer tensed. I said, step away." Jada's gut twisted. They knew. They had seen what the officer was looking up. The lead officer, a grizzled man with deep-set eyes and a scar along his jaw, unlocked the cell door. "You're coming with us." Jada kept her face impassive, but her mind screamed. They weren't taking her to processing. They were taking her somewhere no cameras would be watching. The moment she stepped out of that cell, she wasn't coming back. The lead officer grabbed her arm roughly. Big mistake. Jada had let them get this far. She wasn't letting them take another step. With lightning speed, she twisted her cuffed wrists, wrenching free and driving her knee straight into the officer's solar plexus. He doubled over with a guttural grunt. The second officer lunged, but Jada sidestepped, using her elbow to smash into his nose. Blood sprayed. The young officer behind the desk jumped up. Hey! Jada didn't hesitate. She whirled, twisting her body as she used the cuffs still attached to her wrists to slam against the third officer's temple. He crumpled. A gun clicked. Jada spun. Too late. The lead officer, still gasping for air, had his weapon raised. Big mistake, lady. Jada froze. Her mind raced, scanning her surroundings. She needed an out. Fast. Then, the station went dark. The entire precinct was suddenly swallowed in pitch-black silence. A power cut, but not random. Jada's instinct screamed one thing. This was planned. Someone else was moving the pieces now, and she had no idea if they were friend or foe. The station was plunged into darkness, but Jada didn't need light to fight. She dropped low, instincts taking over. The moment the power cut out, the entire room shifted. The once confident corrupt officers were suddenly vulnerable, panicked. Where is she? One of them barked. Jada heard the slight tremor in his voice. Good. Fear made people sloppy. She pressed her back against the cold wall, listening. Someone shuffled 2 feet to her right. Gun still drawn. The officer she had just fought was hesitating. She wasn't. With a calculated movement, she launched forward, driving her cuffed hands into his wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. Shoot her. Another officer shouted. Too late. Jada swung her foot in a wide arc, kicking the gun into the darkness. A second later, she grabbed the stunned officer's belt, yanking him toward her and using his own body as a human shield. A flash of gunfire erupted from across the room. One of the officers fired blindly. The bullet missed Jada, but the officer in her grasp wasn't so lucky. His body jerked as the impact hit him. One down. She ducked, rolled, and in one smooth motion, grabbed the fallen officer's sidearm. The darkness was still her ally. She could hear frantic breathing, rapid footsteps. Then, freeze. A bright beam of light exploded into the room. A flashlight. For a split second, Jada locked eyes with the remaining officers. Their expressions were a mix of shock, rage, and fear. Then, a thunderous explosion rattled the building. The walls shook. Plaster rained down from the ceiling. Jada knew that sound. Controlled detonation. Someone had just blown the station's exterior wall. The cops turned toward the noise. Jada saw her chance. She sprinted through the chaos. Gun still in hand, cuffs still locked around her wrists, she moved like a shadow. She vaulted over a desk, twisting her body to avoid the debris from the explosion. Her instinct screamed at her, run. Whoever had done this wasn't just trying to help. They had their own agenda. And right now, she needed to figure out who was pulling the strings. Jada's boots skidded across the floor as she reached the blown-out section of the station. Dust and smoke filled the air. Sirens were already wailing in the distance. Backup was coming. Through the haze, she saw it. A black SUV parked right outside the gaping hole in the wall. The driver's side window rolled down. A face appeared. A man, late 40s. Military posture. Familiar. Jada's stomach clenched. She knew him. Get in. Jada didn't move. Who sent you? The man smirked. That same smirk she hadn't seen in years. The people who don't want you dead. Yet. Jada's grip tightened on the stolen gun. She had 2 choices. Stay and be arrested, or worse. Or get in that car and find out who just threw her into a much bigger war. Sirens howled. The cops behind her were regaining their footing. She took a breath. Then, she jumped into the SUV. The second she shut the door, the tires screeched against the pavement. They were gone. As they sped through the dark streets, Jada finally turned to face the man beside her. His voice was calm, calculated. You don't even know how deep this goes, do you? Jada exhaled sharply. Start talking. He smiled. Oh, trust me. You're not ready for what I'm about to tell you. The SUV weaved through the dark streets of the city, tires humming against the asphalt. Jada sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her stolen gun still gripped tightly in her cuffed hands. The man beside her, Agent Marcus Hale, had a calmness about him that made her uneasy. It had been years since she had last seen him. Back then, he was a shadow operative, the kind of guy who showed up when things were about to go sideways. If he was here now, it meant whatever she had just been dragged into was bigger than she thought. Jada kept her voice steady. Who set me up? Hale glanced at her before refocusing on the road. His fingers tapped rhythmically against the steering wheel. You pissed off the wrong people, Miller. Jada's jaw clenched. That wasn't an answer. Try again. Hale smirked, but there was no humor in his eyes. Corrupt cops don't just decide to frame an ex-Navy SEAL for fun. Someone high up wanted you out of the way. Jada's gut tightened. She had spent the last few years off the radar. After her final mission overseas, a mission that never officially happened, she cut ties with the military, built a quiet life in D.C., and stayed out of trouble. Or so she thought. Who wants me gone? She asked again. Hale sighed and reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a folded dossier and tossed it into her lap. Jada hesitated for half a second before unfolding it. What she saw made her blood run cold. A photo of herself, taped to a file labeled classified, Operation Iron Hand. Beneath her photo were 3 words: terminate with extreme prejudice. Jada stared at it. Her own military had marked her for death. She exhaled sharply. Why? Hale tightened his grip on the wheel. Because you're the last loose end in an operation they're trying to erase. Jada's mind raced. Operation Iron Hand. She hadn't heard that name in years. It was a black ops mission, one that never officially happened. A mission where she and her team had been sent to eliminate a foreign warlord, only to realize their real target was an American asset. When she refused to execute an innocent man, things went sideways. Her team was wiped out. She barely made it out alive. She had buried that mission deep, convinced that whoever pulled the strings had moved on. She was wrong. Jada clenched her jaw. If they wanted me dead, why not just take me out quietly? Why frame me? Hale's expression darkened. Because someone inside the system wants you alive just long enough to talk. Jada's pulse quickened. That meant there were multiple players involved. Someone wanted her dead. Someone else wanted her captured. And she had no idea who she could trust. She looked back at Hale. Where are we going? He sighed, slowing the SUV as they approached a nondescript warehouse on the city outskirts. Somewhere safe. For now. Jada wasn't convinced. Nowhere was safe. As the SUV rolled to a stop, Hale turned to face her. His voice was low, serious. Listen to me, Miller. You're not just being hunted. You're part of something bigger than you realize. If you want to survive this, you need to be ready for what's coming. Jada's eyes didn't waver. I was born ready. Hale smirked, but this time, there was something else behind it. We'll see. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a key. Jada frowned. What's that? He leaned in slightly. The key to the truth. Before she could respond, the entire warehouse lit up with headlights. Engines roared. Black SUVs surrounded them. Armed men poured out, guns raised. Hale cursed under his breath. Looks like we're out of time. Jada's grip on her gun tightened. Her pulse stayed steady, calm, controlled, because she knew one thing for certain. If they came for her, they better be ready for war. The air hummed with tension. Jada's instincts went into overdrive as black SUVs surrounded them, headlights blinding in the darkness. Armed men, dressed in tactical gear, poured out, their rifles trained directly on her and Hale. They weren't cops. Too disciplined. Too precise. These were military contractors. Jada exhaled slowly, assessing her surroundings. 4 SUVs. 12 men. Heavily armed. Hale muttered under his breath, gripping the steering wheel. I was hoping we had more time. Jada didn't take her eyes off the men outside. Guess they didn't get the memo. A voice crackled over a loudspeaker. Step out of the vehicle with your hands up. Now. Jada tilted her head. The voice was familiar. Then it clicked. Commander Ethan Voss. Her old commanding officer. The man who had sent her on the mission that never happened. the man she had disobeyed. Jada turned to Hale. Voss is leading this himself? He must really want me dead. Hale didn't answer. Instead, he did something that caught her off guard. He slowly raised both hands and unlatched his seatbelt. Jada's stomach dropped. Hale, what the hell are you doing? Getting you an opening. Before she could stop him, Hale pushed the door open and stepped out. Hold your fire, he shouted, hands still raised. Jada gritted her teeth. She knew this game. Hale was giving them a target, drawing their attention away from her. Voss stepped forward, his presence commanding even in the dim glow of headlights. His eyes locked onto Hale with disdain. Marcus Hale, I should have known you'd be involved in this mess. Hale let out a dry chuckle. Good to see you too, Commander. What's the plan? Kill me first? Or are you saving the honor for her? Voss ignored him, shifting his gaze to the SUV. Jada Miller, step out of the vehicle. Hands where I can see them. Jada didn't move. She gripped the gun Hale had given her. Still cuffed, still outnumbered, but not out of options. Voss sighed, shaking his head. You don't get it, do you? There's no running from this. Jada's pulse was steady, calm, focused. She knew Voss. He was controlled, tactical. But he had one weakness, his ego. Jada pushed the door open and slowly stepped out. Every gun in the clearing trained on her. She kept her hands raised, gun dangling loosely in her cuffed grip. You really went through all this trouble just to kill me? She asked, her voice cool. Voss smirked. No, I went through all this trouble because you're a loose end. Jada arched a brow. So, what now? You execute me like you did my team? A flicker of annoyance crossed Voss's face. Your team died because they failed to follow orders. You were supposed to eliminate the target. You hesitated. That's why they're dead. Jada's blood boiled. He was lying. They were dead because they were expendable. She took a step forward. The soldiers tensed. That's funny, Commander. Because the way I remember it, you sent us in to kill someone who wasn't even a threat. And when we figured it out, you wiped us out. Voss's smirk deepened. You have no idea what you were part of, Miller. Jada held his gaze. Then why am I still alive? Silence. Then Voss sighed, gesturing to his men. Enough talking. Take her. The soldiers moved in. Jada exhaled slowly. 3 seconds. That's all she had. She waited. Let them get closer. Let them think they had her. Then, she struck. Jada twisted, using her cuffed hands as a weapon, swinging the chain between her wrists to hook around the nearest soldier's rifle. She yanked, sending him stumbling forward. Before the others could react, she drove her elbow into his throat. Gunfire erupted. Jada ducked low, grabbing the fallen soldier's sidearm. She kicked his weapon away and rolled behind the SUV. Hale, still standing with his hands raised, suddenly moved. With lightning speed, he yanked a hidden blade from his belt and slashed through Jada's cuffs. Jada felt the cold metal snap free just as another bullet whizzed past her head. Now she was ready. She grabbed the sidearm, exhaled once, then came out firing. 2 shots. Precise. Controlled. The first hit a soldier's shoulder, sending his rifle flying. The second took out a floodlight, plunging the area into partial darkness. Hale moved beside her, taking out another guard with a well-placed knife throw. Chaos erupted. Voss backed away, barking orders as his men scrambled to regain control. Jada zeroed in on him. She moved like a ghost, weaving through gunfire, taking down soldiers with brutal efficiency. Then, a loud clang. Pain exploded in her skull. Everything blurred. Her vision swam as her knees buckled. Someone had blindsided her. A rifle stock to the head. Hale shouted something, but his voice sounded far away. Jada fought to stay conscious. Her body was strong, trained, but the impact had rattled her brain. She blinked hard, trying to focus. A needle. She saw the glint of a syringe just before it plunged into her arm. Jada gasped. The world tilted. Her limbs felt heavy. She struggled, but her body wasn't listening. Voss crouched in front of her as she sank to the ground, his voice smug. You're not dying tonight, Miller, but you are coming with us. Jada tried to move, to fight, but the darkness swallowed her whole. If you're still watching, this is where things get crazy. What would you do in Jada's position? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you're loving this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Jada's eyelids felt like lead. Her body was heavy, sluggish, like she was swimming through concrete. Drugged, she fought against the weight pulling her under, forcing herself to wake up. The first thing she registered was motion, a steady, rhythmic hum beneath her. A vehicle, moving fast. Then, voices. Low, male, controlled, secure. 20 minutes. Jada's pulse steadied. She was still in the fight. She forced her breathing to stay slow, even, faking unconsciousness as she assessed her situation. Her wrists were restrained again, this time with reinforced zip ties, digging into her skin. Amateurs. She was slumped across the back seat of what felt like a military-grade transport vehicle. The air smelled of leather, gun oil, and something faintly metallic. Blood. Her eyes fluttered open just a fraction. 3 men, one driving, another in the passenger seat, and a third Voss, sitting directly across from her, watching her like a wolf eyeing a trapped rabbit. Jada didn't react, didn't let him see she was awake. Voss's voice was calm, controlled. "You're going to make this easy, aren't you, Miller?" Jada stayed limp, listening. The driver scoffed. "She doesn't have a choice. That sedative should keep her under for another hour at least." Voss smirked. "You clearly don't know Jada Miller." Jada's mind worked fast. She had one shot at getting out of this vehicle alive. She needed to be quick, precise, ruthless, and lucky. She flexed her fingers, testing movement. Still weak, but she could work with it. Her gun was gone. So was the knife she had taken from Hale. But she still had her training. She let another few seconds pass. Then, she moved. With a violent jerk, she kicked forward, slamming both feet into Voss's chest. The force sent him flying backward into the opposite door. Before the guards could react, Jada twisted her zip-tied wrists under her legs, bringing them to the front. Now she was dangerous. The driver shouted, swerving. Jada launched herself toward the passenger seat guard, ramming her shoulder into his head. His rifle clattered to the floor. She grabbed it. Voss roared behind her, lunging. But Jada whipped the stock of the rifle into his jaw. The SUV skidded wildly as the driver lost control. Jada's heart pounded. Now or never. She aimed the rifle at the window and fired. Glass exploded. Cold wind rushed in. Before anyone could stop her, Jada threw herself out of the moving SUV. The impact hit her like a sledgehammer. She tumbled down a rocky embankment, pain shooting through her limbs. Dirt, gravel, adrenaline. She rolled, forcing her body to absorb the momentum before she finally came to a stop. Her ears rang. Everything spun, but she was alive. Above her, the transport SUV skidded to a stop. Shouts, orders being screamed. They come after her. Jada pushed herself up, ignoring the pain. She was alone, unarmed, injured, and being hunted. But she wasn't out yet, because now, she was the one in control. If you were in Jada's position, what's your next move? Fight or hide? Drop a comment below. And if you're loving this story, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe. Jada's body ached. Every nerve screamed in protest, but she forced herself to move. No time for pain. No time for weakness. She crouched low, keeping to the shadows as the SUV's headlights swept the terrain. Fan out. Find her. Voss's voice was sharp, commanding. His men were disciplined, tactical, but they weren't SEALs. Jada was. And that meant she had the advantage. Her mind worked fast. She had no weapons, no gear, but she had the environment. The embankment she had tumbled down led into a dense forest. Thick trees, uneven terrain, perfect for disappearing. She ran. Her breath stayed steady, movements controlled. She knew how to move without making a sound. Behind her, the search party spread out, their voices sharp. Check the perimeter. She's injured. She won't get far. Jada smirked. They underestimated her. She slipped deeper into the woods, keeping her steps light and deliberate. Then, a glint of metal. She froze, pressing herself against a tree. A soldier stood 10 feet away, scanning the darkness. His rifle was raised, his body tense. Jada's pulse slowed. She could hear everything. His breathing, the faint rustle of fabric as he shifted, the soft beep of his comm device. She counted his movements. 1, 2, 3. He turned his back. Jada moved. Silent, deadly, precise. She slipped behind him and struck. Her arms snaked around his neck in a brutal chokehold. She cut off his airway instantly, dragging him backward before he could fire his weapon. He struggled, thrashing, then went limp. Jada lowered him gently to the ground. She stripped him of his knife and sidearm. Now she was armed. She clicked his comms button. Static. Then, Echo Team, report. Jada grinned. Perfect. She pressed the button, disguising her voice. No sign of her. She must have doubled back. Moving west. Silence. Then, copy that. All units move west. Stay alert. Jada exhaled. They took the bait. She glanced toward the dim glow of headlights in the distance. The SUVs were still stationed at the top of the embankment, their engines idling. A way out. She needed one of those vehicles. Her fingers tightened around the knife. She was done running. It was time to take control. Jada crouched low, steadying her breath. The night was her ally now. Shadows stretched long, the sounds of the forest masking her movements. Her grip tightened around the stolen knife and sidearm. She had two options. 1, steal an SUV and escape. 2, take out the remaining search team and make sure they never come after her again. Jada had spent her entire career thinking ahead. If she left survivors, Voss would just send more men. No loose ends. Decision made. She moved like a ghost. The search team had scattered, heading west per her false radio message. But 2 men stayed behind, guarding the vehicles. Jada stayed low, her mind calculating. 2 men, 1 rifle, 1 sidearm. She needed speed, precision, brutality. She circled wide, approaching from behind. The first man stood near the driver's side of an SUV, scanning the area. His posture was relaxed. Too relaxed. Big mistake. Jada moved. With silent, deadly efficiency, she wrapped her arm around his throat, using the knife to slice across his carotid artery. He choked, a wet, gurgling sound, then collapsed. 1 down. The second man heard something. His head snapped toward her direction. Jada didn't hesitate. She raised the stolen pistol and fired once. A clean shot to the temple. 2 down. Jada exhaled slowly. Now for Voss. The commander had stayed back, monitoring the radio chatter. His men were blind, distracted. She had the upper hand. Jada sprinted toward the SUVs, her boots silent against the dirt. She grabbed the first soldier's rifle, slinging it over her back, and slipped into the driver's seat of the nearest vehicle. The engine purred beneath her fingers. She took one last look at the clearing. The rest of the search team was still too far away. Her instinct screamed, "Go now." But she wasn't done yet. Jada reached for the SUV's radio system. She pressed the comm button, her voice calm, cold. "Voss." Silence. Then, a slow inhale. "Miller." She smiled, but there was no humor in it. "You should have killed me when you had the chance." Voss's voice was tight. "I will." Jada's smile faded. "No, you won't." Then, she floored the gas pedal. The SUV roared to life, tires spitting dirt as she tore out of the clearing. Gunfire erupted behind her. Bullets slammed into the rear of the vehicle, shattering glass. But Jada didn't stop. She was done running. Now, she was going to find out who ordered the hit on her. And when she did, she'd burn them to the ground. Jada gripped the wheel, heart pounding, pulse steady. The SUV tore down the dirt road, bullets whizzing past the rear windshield. She didn't flinch. She had been under worse fire before. But this wasn't a battlefield overseas. This was her own country, and the people trying to kill her were supposed to be on her side. That ended tonight. The city lights appeared in the distance. She had a plan. First, she needed to disappear. She yanked the steering wheel hard, cutting through a narrow dirt path that led into an abandoned construction site. The moment she hit a blind curve, she killed the headlights and skidded to a stop. Her body moved fast. She grabbed the stolen rifle, extra ammo, and the knife. Then, she bailed. She disappeared into the darkness seconds before two black SUVs roared past, still chasing her ghost. Let them. She was already moving in the opposite direction. Jada moved like a ghost through the city, blending into the night. She ditched the tactical gear she had stolen, swapped clothes in a dark alley, and walked out looking like just another woman in a hoodie and jeans. But her mind was razor-sharp. She needed intel. She needed a name. And there was only one person who could get it for her. Devin Cross, a former NSA hacker turned black market information broker. If anyone had access to government files that weren't supposed to exist, it was him. Jada made her way to an underground high-stakes poker club, Devin's usual haunt. Inside, the air was thick with cigar smoke and the quiet murmurs of men who thought they ran the city. Devin was exactly where she expected. A private booth in the back, surrounded by expensive whiskey and bad decisions. He looked up, saw her, and froze. Oh, hell no. Jada slid into the seat across from him, voice calm. Miss me? Devin's eyes darted around, his fingers tapping the table, his tell. He was nervous. Jada, I don't do this kind of work anymore. Jada leaned in, keeping her voice low. Then I guess you don't care that someone in the government just put a kill order on me? Devin swallowed hard. He knew what that meant. No loose ends. She slid a flash drive across the table. I need access to Black Ops files. Specifically, Operation Iron Hand. Devin exhaled sharply. Jesus, that's above my clearance. Jada's gaze hardened. Since when do you care about clearance? He hesitated. Then, without another word, he grabbed his laptop and plugged in the drive. Jada watched as lines of encrypted code flashed across the screen. Devin worked fast, fingers flying over the keyboard. Then, after a few tense minutes, he went pale. Oh shit. Jada's stomach clenched. Talk. Devin slowly turned the screen toward her, and Jada's blood ran cold. The kill order on her wasn't just signed by military intelligence. It was signed by someone she trusted, Marcus Hale. Her mind went blank for a second. Hale had saved her, helped her escape. Why the hell would he be the one who signed off on her execution? Jada forced herself to focus. Is it real? Or was it forged? Devin shook his head, grim. The encryption is legit. Hale put your name on the list himself. Rage curled in Jada's gut, hot and sharp. She had trusted him. He had betrayed her. Jada took a slow breath, forcing the anger down. Emotions didn't win wars. Strategy did. She stood up, sliding the stolen pistol back into her waistband. Devin gave her a wary look. What are you gonna do? Jada's voice was ice. Find Hale. She turned toward the exit, her body coiled with purpose. And end this. Did you see that betrayal coming? What should Jada do next? Confront Hale or set a trap? Drop a comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Jada's grip on the pistol tightened as she walked into the night. Her mind a storm of betrayal and cold calculation. Marcus Hale, the man who had saved her. The man who had told her she was being hunted. The same man who had signed her execution order. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was personal. Jada pulled out her stolen phone and sent a single text to a secured number. We need to meet. Now. A minute passed. Then, a reply. Pier 17. Midnight. Alone. Jada smirked. He still thought she was predictable. Good. The docks were quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that only came when killers were waiting in the dark. Jada approached the meeting point. Steps slow, controlled. Hale was already there, leaning against a rusted shipping container, hands in his pockets. Casual. Like this wasn't life or death. You're late, Miller. Jada stopped a few feet away, her pistol already drawn. Cut the bullshit, Hale. You sold me out. Hale sighed, shaking his head. You always did see things in black and white. Jada's finger tightened on the trigger. You put my name on the list. Signed off on my execution. Hale exhaled slowly. Then, he did something unexpected. He raised his hands. Not in surrender, but in something close to resignation. It wasn't supposed to be like this, Jada. I didn't want you dead. I wanted to control how it happened. Jada's gut twisted. What the hell did that mean? Hale continued. his voice level. If I hadn't signed off on your termination, someone else would have. Someone who wouldn't have given you a chance to fight back. Jada's pulse hammered. You knew they were coming for me. And you let them. Hale's eyes darkened. I couldn't stop the machine, Jada. All I could do was make sure you had a chance. Jada felt sick. She had been played. The kill order had been real, but Hale had used it to push her into action. Used her. Again. Her voice was cold. Who ordered it? Hale hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. That was all Jada needed. She stepped forward, pressing the gun against his ribs. Say the name. A slow exhale. Then, Hale whispered it. Jada's world tilted. She knew that name. It wasn't just some high-ranking official. It was a senator. Someone powerful enough to bury entire operations. Someone who had orchestrated Operation Iron Hand from the beginning. Someone who had given the order to wipe out her team and frame her as a loose end. Hale's voice was quiet. You can't win this fight, Jada. She took a step back, gun unwavering. Watch me. Then, she pulled the trigger. A single shot. Not to kill. To wound. Hale collapsed, clutching his leg. His expression wasn't anger. It was acceptance. Jada turned, disappearing into the darkness. Her war wasn't over. It was just beginning. And now? She wasn't just running. She was hunting. Did Jada make the right call? Should she have killed Hale? And what's her next move? Drop a comment below. If you love this story, smash that like button and subscribe for more. The end. Or is it?